So today we are going over managing your Walmart deductions. So how this usually works is we're going to present you an hour, 45 minutes to an hour worth of content, and then we're going to have 15 minutes at the end for questions. So we always suggest get your questions in early because we always get a lot of questions, like 40 to 50 questions, and we can't always get to all of them. So if you get them in early, then we'll probably be able to address them throughout the webinar. How you do that is you submit it through the Q&A button down at the bottom. I always encourage people to use the Q&A function rather than the chat. Make sure that we don't miss it, and we can also follow up with you afterwards if you use the Q&A. Awesome. Perfect. So welcome everyone. I'm Melody Hayes. I'm the VP of Marketing here at SupplyPike, and we have lovely Stacy Tan. So she is our Senior Director of Retail Strategy here. She has over a decade's worth of experience in the retail world. She has worked on both sides, supplier, brokerage. She has done it all. And she also leads our product development for our retail intelligence app. So she truly does everything here at SupplyPike. We joke about what doesn't Stacy do? So we have Stacy here today, and she is going to be leading us through deductions. What do we got next? Awesome. So here is our agenda. We have a jam-packed agenda for you guys here today. We're going to be going over what deductions are, how you can identify account payable deductions in Walmart systems, what you need to actually the information that you need to gather to actually dispute those deductions, how you can track those repayments, and then again, we'll save a little bit of time for questions. At the end, so after the hour's worth of education, we always encourage people, if you're curious about what SupplyPike does, we will be staying on just a couple more minutes to give you a little demo of our product that helps with deductions. But again, that's totally optional. If you're curious, please stay. We love to see you. If not, feel free to skip it. All right, and here I think this is where I hand it off to you, Stacy.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Melody. I'm really excited to talk to everybody today. Before we get started, we always like to do a really quick introduction of who SupplyPike is, especially for newcomers. Maybe you guys have gotten our newsletters before or seen the amazing supplier wiki page. We always just like to level set and make sure you guys know who we are. So we are a Northwest Arkansas based software company, and basically our bread and butter, what we do every single day is we create cloud-based tools to help our CPG teams essentially maximize their cash flow and be A+ suppliers to the retailers that you guys work with. We do this in a couple of different ways through a few of the apps that we've developed over the time. First one is an app called Retail Intelligence that is really focused around sales and replenishment reporting. We also have an app called OTIF Radar, which, as you can imagine, is around Walmart's on-time and in-full compliance program. So getting to the root cause of OTIF issues and also fighting OTIF fines. And our last and by far most popular product is Deductions Navigator. As Melody mentioned, we'll give you guys a little taste of it towards the end of the webinar. But really quick, that is really aimed at helping you identify invalid deductions at Walmart and also disputing them with just one click. And really cool stuff. We've actually just rolled out automated disputing. So I can't even say one click anymore. I have to say 0 clicks now. But yeah, so really quick, we work with over 200 different companies representing $25 billion in retail impact across 50 different product categories. Really cool stuff too is that we started off with Walmart and Sam's Club. Of course, we're Northwest Arkansas, right in their backyard. But last year we launched in Kroger. This year, in fact, next week, we will be launching in Target. So that is very exciting. And towards the end of the year, we will be launching in Amazon as well. So really excited to grow in the retail space and continue to support our CPG partners. So as Melody mentioned, we have a jam-packed schedule today. So I am going to work through this content as quickly as I can, but definitely feel free to submit questions as they come up. But really, we want to talk through, what Walmart deductions are, as well as the life cycle of a deduction, what you can do about it, and essentially how you can make sure that you are getting every single dollar that you are owed back from Walmart. So
I wanted to jump in and say, I did send this in the chat, but I just want to remind everyone, we will be sending out the recording as well as the slide deck. You'll see it in your inbox within 1 to 2 days. Also, just if you guys have been doing deductions for a long time, this is more of an introductory course. We do have some more advanced ones that I will send in the chat here shortly. So perfect.
Awesome. Thank you, Melody. Okay, yeah. So really quickly, guys, wanted to introduce you guys to kind of the three main types of deductions at Walmart. I'm going to go in depth for each of these ones over the next couple of slides, but at a high level, essentially, there are accounts payable deductions, accounts receivable deductions, and post audits. Just depending on your company size, your company type, we work with teams that kind of have three siloed departments to address each of these types of deductions. And we also work with teams where they have one team kind of working them all. So it's really important to be able to kind of distinguish what each of these deductions are so you kind of know what to do about them. So the first one is the accounts payable deduction. Really quick overview of it. It's going to originate from Walmart's accounts payable department. And essentially, at a high level, what the definition of an AP deduction is Walmart will withhold payment of specific supplier invoices or retract payments for returned merchandise. So, kind of in layman's terms, you are invoicing Walmart for an order that they placed to you. Walmart determines for one of over 100 different reasons, because there are 100 different deduction codes, that they do not want to pay you in full for whatever reason it is, valid or invalid. And they will actually just short pay you on that. So you invoice them for $100, they decide they only want to pay you $80. That $20 represents an AP deduction. So claim numbers are typically going to be the invoice numbers, and you can find backup information for AP deductions in an app called APIS, which stands for the Accounts Payable Inquiry System in Retail Link. As I mentioned earlier, how you know this is an AP deduction typically is that it is going to be withheld from a check. And the key point here is that it's going to include a deduction code and a description on the check itself. I'll kind of make a note on why I pointed this out when we head over to the accounts receivable or AR type deductions. Kind of last thought on the AP deductions piece is most of these are going to be disputed through the accounts payable dispute portal or APDP. If you guys have done this for a while, you're probably familiar with Walmart's old system called Direct Commerce. They have since kind of moved over to the APDP system. And as of today, I would say a vast majority of any sort of AP deduction is going to flow through that system. And we'll cover how to find it, how to use APDP, and all that good stuff kind of in this webinar as well. Accounts receivable deductions, as one can imagine, originate from the Walmart AR department. And in this case, Walmart is actually invoicing you for violations. So in the AP deduction example, you invoice Walmart for an order, they short pay you a certain amount, and that's an AP deduction. For AR deductions, Walmart is invoicing you for the amount. In this particular example, backup information is going to be available in high radius rather than APIS. And why this kind of gets confusing sometimes is because when Walmart invoices you, if you don't pay that invoice, then they will go ahead and take a deduction and withhold it from a check. So you may see the deduction show up in APIS, but you'll know that it's an AR deduction because invoice numbers will often start with a 7,000 and they'll have a division or store number on the check line of 059,000. So that's how you know it's technically an AR deduction. Walmart invoiced you, you didn't pay it, and now they've taken it off of a check. Another really kind of key clue that it's an AR deduction is you'll find that check lines do not include deduction codes or descriptions. So with an AP deduction, you'll see something like a code 22 or a code 10 or whatever it is. AR deductions often, again, do not include that deduction code or description. Another key thing to note here is that you will dispute AR deductions through High Radius. High Radius is a third-party app that you do have to get an account for. So really quickly, APDP should be an app in Retail Link. You should just automatically have access to it. If you don't, you can talk to your Retail Link admin or the Retail Link help desk. High Radius is a completely separate portal. It does not flow through Retail Link. So you'll actually have to go and request an account through the High Radius team. And we have information on how you can do that if that would be helpful for you guys. And then the last one is the dreaded post audit. We actually just had a webinar on post audits, I think last week. And this is a situation where Walmart can take money, where it originates from an internal Walmart audit team or one of numerous external contractors that Walmart uses. So basically, they have the ability to go back up to 2 years and comb through any of your transactions, your invoices, your checks, even emails and correspondence with your buyer and replenishment team to try and get more money from you. And they are incentivized, especially the external contractors, to find as much money as they can. They actually get paid a percentage of what they're able to claim back for Walmart. So post audit's kind of scary because they have such a large window, that 2-year window. They usually will kind of hit in really big numbers. So whereas with AR fines, which are usually on a monthly cadence, AP fines usually on a check or invoice cadence, post audits are usually typically once a year and really, really high dollar amounts. So typically, if you want to get any sort of proof for post audits, your notice and backup information is going to be provided via email. So a lot of times it is a contact on your OSA, so your supplier agreement with Walmart, that will receive what they call a post audit packet. And it'll include information on the claim, as well as backup information on why this firm is trying to claim that money from you. One key thing to note, which is, again, kind of scary, audits under $100,000 can be deducted immediately from your checks. Anything over $100,000, you will get a 30-day notice to kind of go after. And how you dispute post audits typically is you'll dispute it directly with the audit firm that conducted the audit. There are situations where you can loop in your buyer for kind of extenuous situations, and they do have influence over the post audit company. But generally speaking, the process is that it will flow through the audit firm. Okay, so moving on to how you can actually identify AP deductions. I'm going to walk you guys through basically how you can locate them within Retail Link. So if you are following along at home, feel free to log in and follow along with us. But basically, you should be able to go to the apps page, and if you can either search or just look alphabetically. There should be an app called APIS, or the Accounts Payable Inquiry System. Kind of pro tip for you guys, you can see these stars and all of these different tiles here. If you click on the star, that will kind of favorite the app, and then it will be available on your home page. So, just save you a click or two if it's something that you're regularly exploring. So once you get into APIS, you want to go into the checks page because, again, AP deductions are something that are taken off of a check. And you'll be able to see this checklist. So essentially, you're going to want to fill out information, pick the supplier number that's relevant, and also basically include your first invoice or last invoice numbers so that it can, essentially do the search for you. From there, and this, of course, is demo data, but you should see something that looks like this, detailed information for check number 1 as an example. Really, the key indicators here are that you're going to see a negative amount paid. So again, this is something that Walmart is withholding from this particular check. And then you are also going to get that deduction code or description. So in this example, it is a code 57, quantity discount, as well as a code 22, merchandise billed not shipped. So as I mentioned, Walmart has, I think, close to 100 different AP deduction codes out there. We've got some really great resources on what each of those codes mean. But essentially from Walmart, this is just about all the information you are going to get on a particular AP deduction. Kind of how you can do a little bit of research is most of the time your AP deduction is going to be tied to an invoice, not always, but this is usually helpful to, for you guys to kind of identify, okay, it was this invoice number, these are the items that we shipped. And so this is what they might be trying to address. And as I mentioned earlier, how you can differentiate AR from AP deductions on checks is, again, that AR type deduction, the accounts receivable deduction, is going to have a negative amount paid. But the key is that it probably does not have any sort of deduction code or description. So we get a lot of questions around that. A lot of times, like, I have deduction, but there's no code. I don't know what to do with it. Most of the time, again, that's going to be an AR deduction. And then you would go ahead and research that in HighRadius. So again, you need to have access to that portal in order for you to be able to do some research on that deduction. And again, kind of key indicators. you'll see that the invoice number often begins with that 7,000, and then it's also going to have that division store number of 059,000. So again, just clues that these are AR type deductions rather than AP, and why that matters is just how you address them. So again, AP deductions, dispute through APDP, and research through APIS. AR deductions, you're going to research and dispute through high radius. Okay, cool. So once you kind of identify which of your checks have claims on them, so essentially those deductions, you can actually go into the claim portion of APIS and do a little bit of more digging there. You can either search for one invoice number at a time or a range of invoice numbers if they are sequential. Kind of pro tip is that the claim date filter is not always accurate. So usually we kind of recommend just filling out the top portion. That should give you enough information to be able to search for the claims that you're looking for in APIS. So once you pull that up, you should be able to see, kind of detail that looks something like this. You can see, basically the PO number, claim dates, all of the different item numbers, what they're claiming in terms of quantity and dollars, as well as, a detailed description of the different codes that they are trying to claim against you. So one thing to note is that there are times when you may not be able to find an AP claim in APIS. And why this happens is because occasionally Walmart will do something called a manual deduction. So essentially it is a deduction, but it's created outside Walmart's normal process. So it's not going to be an automated thing that automatically gets generated if Walmart thinks you've short shipped them, for example. However, these are still real deductions. And kind of how you can do that is you identify on check line by a microfilm number of, it's going to be basically a 9-digit number or multiple random digits as opposed to kind of this 00025 type format or similar for the more automated type deductions. So one thing to note is if there is no AP claim in APIS, so basically there's no claim record, then the only way for you to get that information is by requesting it from Walmart. And this is kind of one of my favorite parts in our presentation. We have a coworker that jokes about this all the time. But yeah, you have to basically use the microfilm number as if you are in a 70s James Bond film from the check line, and then utilize the request backup form from Walmart, and they will be able to send you additional information on that particular claim. So as Melody mentioned, we will be sending this presentation after our webinar is over today. So no worries about having to screenshot anything. You should be able to just click on this file and it will give you the ability to access this backup documentation request form. Okay, cool. So now that we've kind of established what an accounts payable deduction is, we really want to talk you guys through kind of the meat and potatoes of, the accounts payable process, which is disputing AP type deductions. And this is usually, a part where a lot of people like to pay attention just because, again, this is the best way that you can go and try and get money back from Walmart. So at a high level, always again like to level set. So can a Walmart AP deduction be disputed? And the answer to that is yes. So deductions can be valid or invalid, as I kind of alluded to earlier. Just because Walmart took a deduction, that does not mean that they were correct. So there are multiple scenarios where Walmart incorrectly takes money. A great example of that we hear a lot of is like a code 25 type deduction that is to do with shortages, and Walmart is basically saying that I received nothing from this particular invoice, which most of the time, 99% of suppliers, you're not going to be invoicing Walmart unless you actually shipped the goods. So code 25s, again, most of the time are not going to be correct. And usually when we help our supplier teams dispute them, we have like a 95% plus win rate for those types of codes. So again, good thing to know that number one, they can be disputed. Number two, deductions can be valid or invalid. So if you guys are seeing really big deductions being taken off of checks, you know that there's recourse to go after them. So Walmart does allow suppliers to dispute, again, most types of invalid AP deductions. Again, that's key. Obviously, if it is a valid deduction, you really did not ship the product, then of course, it doesn't really make sense to dispute it. But essentially, there are two main paths that you can go down if you want to request repayment. So the first one is going to be through your buyer. This is a little bit less common, but I'll kind of touch on that briefly. And then the second one is through APDP. So again, it's that accounts payable dispute portal that we discussed. Okay, so the first one is going to be talking to your buyer. Again, slightly less common just because, as we all know here in the room, social capital with your buyer is often a little bit limited. So you want to try and not go to them for, kind of things that you can solve programmatically if you can help it. But essentially, your buyer does have the authority to recommend payback for most deductions, but the key is that they are under no obligation to do so. So just because you request it, that does not mean that the Walmart buyer has to agree. Now, of course, if you are going to be providing proof documentation and like, hey, this is why we're asking for this money to get paid back, then your chances for success go up exponentially. But we just wanted to, again, kind of make it clear that just because you ask doesn't mean they have to say yes. So when is a good situation to talk to your buyer rather than utilizing APDP? So there are actually certain types of deductions that are not to be considered for dispute in APDP. Examples of that are things like pricing claims or disagreements on allowances. So if you used to do the dispute process through direct commerce, you technically could have submitted disputes for any types of deductions, but with APDP, they have actually limited that. So examples of that are you can do shortage type deductions in APDP, but again, things like pricing claims or disagreements, you typically have to flow through your buyer. And why that is, of course, makes a lot of sense. Your pricing claims, this is usually going to be a conversation that you've had with your buyer. Same thing with allowances, it's going to be contract based. So that's kind of, we do actually have a webinar, I think we did it earlier this month on APDP, and it outlines all of the different types of deductions that can flow through APDP and which ones have to flow through your buyer. So feel free to check that webinar out.
I will send it in the chat.
Perfect. Thanks, Melody. Yeah, so kind of pro tips here, and this is pretty, again, obvious, I'm sure, to the folks that we work with or that you guys, are familiar with this, is you want to always consider your relationship with your buyer. So, again, try not to go after them for nickel and dime sort of things. If you can help it, of course, if it is something that's impactful to your business, absolutely go for it. And then again, always have proof for why you're questioning the charge. So you can't just go to your buyer and say, I disagree, I don't really have proof, but I just don't want to pay it. That's obviously going to be a much more difficult conversation. Okay, so that is the buyer side. Now we're going to kind of walk through the APDP or accounts payable dispute portal side. So I kind of alluded to this a little bit earlier. Direct commerce, old way of doing things, APDP, new way of doing things. Again, this is an app that already exists within Retail Link. So you should be able to, again, just go to the apps page, search for APDP, and it should show up for you. If not, reach out to your Retail Link admin or your Retail Link help desk, and they should be able to help sort that out. So as I noted, many of the common deduction codes like shortages and returns can be disputed here. And as you guys can kind of see here, you can track many of your disputes through the APDP process or through the dispute resolution process. So things like drafts, things that are waiting for your action, things that Walmart is researching, what's been approved, denied, so on and so forth. So here's some key highlights about disputing in APDP that we always like to make sure we clarify for you guys. So AP deductions can typically be disputed up to 2 years after the claim date. And why we italicize that is because Walmart's own documentation states something different. It says 2 years after the check date, but that is actually incorrect. It is 2 years after the claim date. We have verified this across a number of different sources, so we feel pretty comfortable with that. One thing to note is that any of the disputes that you send through APDP are actually going to be reviewed by a third party called Genpact. and they will review disputes on behalf of Walmart. So it does not necessarily flow through a Walmart internal team. And many times your Walmart buyer is not going to know if you're disputing things. So, sometimes we have suppliers that are like, why isn't my buyer helping? They probably don't know. Once you hit send on APDP, it goes off to the Genpact team and they will review it. And you have to loop your buyer in if you have any questions. Disputes might be returned to you requesting more information, or they could be rejected outright. So, naturally, if you don't have any proof documentation, the Genpact team could just say, I have no reason to, overturn this. We're going to go ahead and reject it. Or they might go, okay, hey, they sent us some proof documentation, but this doesn't really give me a black or white answer. Let's go ahead and request a little bit more information. And you have the ability to kind of go back and forth with the Genpact team to try and get that dispute completed. So one thing to note is you do have up to 2 chances to challenge a rejection. And after that, the deduction can only be disputed through your buyer. So with direct commerce before, it was, again, kind of the wild, wild west. With APDP, they have tightened up a lot of these processes. So if you do get a rejection, again, you have 2 chances to try and fight that. And then if it gets denied 2 more times, so 3 times total, then you can only dispute that deduction with your buyer. So last thing we want to note, because we get a lot of questions around this, and I totally understand why. A lot of people are like, so how long does it take for them to review it? How long does it take for me to get paid? Generally speaking, just depending on the type of deduction, the backlog on Walmart side, as well as the size of the dispute that you're trying to pass, it can sometimes take 2 months or more for a dispute to even be reviewed. Based on data that we have working with over 300 different companies, we see about a 27-day average for disputes to be reviewed. But one thing to note is we do see some disputes that get auto approved. So that is actually a function on APDP side. If the claim is a certain type, and again, under a certain dollar amount, typically, we've usually seen under $100, they can be automatically approved and you can get that money back the next day. We have also seen backlogs of 4 to 5 months, kind of on the extreme side. And so kind of, it all bubbles up to about 2 to 3 months on average. So we always like to clarify this just so you guys know kind of what you are in for when you hit send on an APDP dispute. Okay, so one thing to really note for you guys, again, that's a little bit different than what direct commerce was, is as you can see here, DCI required typing in all dispute information from scratch for any type of AP deduction. APDP does make distinctions between claim and invoice-based disputing. So, what they require you to do is first look up a claim or an invoice record, and then you create a dispute from that record. So I mentioned it a little bit earlier, and Melody said that she was sharing it in the chat, that we have an APDP specific webinar that actually goes into step-by-step how you get into APDP, how you search for claims, pro tips, how you fill it out, so on and so forth. So I won't go too much into the weeds here, but just wanted to let you guys know that, again, 2 types of disputing in APDP: claim and invoice based. So if you do want to dispute a claim, essentially what you're going to have to do is create a dispute from a claim if there is a claim record in APIS. And you should be able to essentially use this claim number, kind of plug that into APDP where it says claim number, search for that, and then it should pop up basically a list of claims. And then you can essentially, there will be a dispute button. You hit that dispute button, and you essentially then have to fill out information, include your proof documentation, and then you're ready to go. If you don't have a claim number, then you will create a dispute from an invoice if a deduction only appears on a check and there's no claim record in APIS. And you'd follow that same process. Instead, it would say check number. So you'd create a dispute based on invoice. You put in that invoice number, and then you'd be able to do it that way.
Hey, Stacey, we have a question.
Yeah.
Could we dispute code 94, so merchandise return defective merchandise? And is that still on APDP?
That is a very good question. So yes, returns still flow through APDP, the code 94s, and along with that are code 60s usually, which is the freight and handling charge that go along with returns. One thing that I would clarify, and I'm going to try real hard not to go too much into the weeds, but code 94s, usually whether or not you should dispute them really depend on your return defective allowance, basically with Walmart. So zooming out a little bit, usually if you are a Walmart supplier, when you are starting your business, with Walmart, you will negotiate a certain defective allowance with Walmart. And what that is saying basically is you're telling Walmart, hey, we agree that a certain percentage of our product is going to be, returned, defective, whatever it is. And so we're going to give you an allowance on that. So great, easy example of that is, let's just say, I'll use a round number, 5% defective allowance. So if you sell 100 units this month, as long as 5 or below, you have 5 or below returns, then you are good to go. And if you have more than 5 returns, then Walmart can actually claim anything on top of those 5 from you, because Walmart is saying, yes, we agreed that we would not, potentially be able to sell 5, but now we can't sell 8 because an additional 3 got returned or defective. And so they can actually, it is valid for them to claim those additional 3 from you. So I would say first check on your defective allowance in your OSA, in Retail Link, and then from there you can make the determination on whether or not you want to dispute code 94s and 60s in APDP. Sweet.
Yes, thank you. We have a couple more questions, but I'm going to.
Oh, save it till later. Okay. I will keep going then. All righty. Okay. So one thing to note to you guys really quickly for APDP deductions. So before with DCI, direct commerce, you would essentially create disputes at the claim level. But in APDP, you're actually submitting disputes on every claim line. So it is possible to have multiple dispute statuses within a single claim or deduction. So on one hand, it is nice to have that level of granularity to really help determine what you do and do not want to dispute. But, kind of the other side of that coin is that it does get harder to actually track the status of disputed claims, because now you can have multiple, again, claims, multiple dispute statuses on one claim or one deduction. So just wanted to point that out for you guys. Okay, so I'm going to move on to the gathering information for disputes portion of the webinar. And this is really, really important because, as we kind of mentioned earlier, you can't just say to Walmart, I don't want that, give me my money back. I wish we could. But you have to be able to provide proof documentation to Walmart as to why they were incorrect and why you should actually get repaid for that specific dispute. So again, and the same colleague I mentioned earlier about the 70s James Bond films also makes a joke. As you can see, we're kind of nerdy at Supply Bike, but he always says, whenever you want to go and dispute a Walmart AP deduction, or really any deduction, it's like going to court, except in this case, you are guilty until proven innocent, because Walmart has already taken the money and they place the burden of proof on you. So they've taken the money and it's your job to tell them why that is not correct. So generally speaking, the type of information that you need to actually go up against an AP deduction is you want to have basic information about the claim, invoice, PO, and shipment, again, just to make sure that all of your bases are covered. And then the key thing as well is proof documentation that is actually going to support your dispute. And we'll give you examples of the types of proof documentation that you need. Information from the claim. You will need things like your claim number. As we mentioned earlier, for deductions related to an invoice, the claim number is the invoice number. You'll need the claim date. So this is often confused for the invoice date or the check date, but this is actually the specific date from the claim. You should be able to find that. Dispute type. So this is actually automatically calculated for you. We just wanted to help kind of explain what it is. So when you're looking at an APDP dispute, you know what all the fields are. It's going to be calculated from the store and division number on the deduction check line and location type. Before, when we were doing this through direct commerce, you kind of had to guess at this based on what you thought Walmart wanted to see for dispute type. Thankfully, again, they've streamlined quite a bit of it from the APDP process. Another thing is you will also have a claim code. And then, you know, those are the claim codes that we talked about earlier, those 22s, 24s, and 25s. And then you also have the disputed amount. So a pro tip here, you don't always have to adhere to this, but we always typically try to recommend that you dispute the full claim amount, even if you're only due part of it, because we have seen in the past that Walmart will just outright reject a dispute if the dispute amount does not match the claim amount, which is kind of crazy. But yeah, so if the claim from Walmart was $100 and you're like, oh, I'm only owed 50, Walmart will be like, oh, okay, 50 and 100 don't match. There's something going on here. We're just going to go ahead and reject it. So pro tip, go ahead and dispute the full claim amount. That way, at least it's just one less barrier to entry. And even if you truly only owe that 50 in the proof documentation, you know, the Genpact team will know that and they will only pay you back on that $50. So other information, again, all of this should be automatically filled out for you, but just nice to know what it is and where it's coming from. Your supplier number is going to be your 6-digit supplier number, purchase order, freight carrier. All this is pretty self-explanatory. Your location is really going to be where the claim originated from. Shipping method, it's either going to be collect or prepaid. Another pro tip is we just recommend utilizing collect if you are not sure, but your transportation and logistics team should be able to provide guidance on this. But again, if you are unsure, go ahead and use collect. And then the description, this is technically optional, but we recommend going ahead and putting information in. Short and sweet is best. We have found, so we've actually interviewed a number of Genpact associates, and they noted that, you know, individuals that are actually reviewing the disputes often don't even look at the description. They will actually not really reference it until, you know, something gets rejected or they ask for more information and you send them more information, then they'll kind of take a look at what your reasoning is. So generally speaking, they're only going to look at the claim information that you're putting in, so the basics that we just went over, and then the proof documentation, again, backup for why you're saying you should get paid back for this. Okay, so moving into the proof documentation piece. So the first one that you're really, you know, that we always recommend wherever possible, especially around any shortage type deduction codes, are going to be your shipping documents. So basically this is proof that, you know, it's going to be, if you're a collect supplier, meaning Walmart backs up to your facility and picks up your product, this is proof that it was picked up in full. And if you are prepaid, meaning Walmart, or you are responsible for getting the product to Walmart's DCs, then it's proof that it was delivered in full. So really the key types of documentations, depending on how you ship, if you are collect, the expectation is a signed bill of lading. Your warehouse or 3PL team should be able to provide this for you. If you are prepaid, you are going to need a proof of delivery or a drop trailer stamp. And typically speaking, your carrier is going to be able to provide this for you. We get a lot of questions from like collect suppliers, for example, that are like, do I need a proof of delivery to show that it delivered? Actually, you typically don't. If you're able to get that somehow, awesome, use it, more proof. But generally speaking, because it's being picked up by Walmart's fleet, it gets really, really hard to get proof documentation that your PO actually arrived there in full. And Walmart knows this. And so typically speaking, your signed bill of lading is going to be sufficient if you are a collect supplier. For the next kind of proof documentation that you need is an invoice. Typically why you would need this is basically you're just showing Walmart that the invoice was transmitted correctly. So, you know, it's telling Walmart, hey, it was for the correct items with the correct quantities, cost, and allowances. We made a note here that it's not necessary for all types of deductions, just because Walmart should have this information. technically speaking, but it doesn't hurt to be able to provide a copy of this. And usually this is something that your team should be able to easily generate because you guys are the ones sending the invoice. Um, Another really key type of proof documentation is the purchase order. Again, technically speaking, Walmart should have this available, but it is Walmart. So again, we kind of made this note that it's not always necessary, but if you have it available, we recommend going ahead and attaching it. And this is just proof that the invoice is matching what was ordered. So you aren't over invoicing or under invoicing, and you're able to say, hey, Walmart, everything matches correctly. Please pay us in full. Another type of proof documentation is the supplier agreement. We've talked about this a couple of times. Again, this is just kind of laying out your contractual obligations with Walmart. You and the buying team should have signed this. And usually you're going to use these for more allowance type deductions codes, which make a lot of sense. As a friendly reminder, anything that's going to be, kind of allowance related, you're going to dispute with your buyer, but this is still proof documentation that you could be helpful to share with your buyer on why they need to reverse a certain type of deduction. So these are other types of proof documentation that we've seen be successful in the APDP and buyer dispute process. Things like claim documents. Again, this is, you can see kind of the asterisk there, not proof, but the best practice to include when disputing, packing slips if available, reports from Retail Link. So you can utilize the decision support app for inventory received or returns information, buyer approval emails, all of that good stuff. So of course, your mileage may vary just depending on the type of deduction code that you're going after. But in that deduction kind of code guide that I mentioned very early on in the webinar, we have all of that information outlined for you on what each code means, and then also what proof documentation is recommended for every single code at Walmart. Okay, I know I've been talking a lot. I appreciate you guys coming along for the ride so far.
Would you like a question break?
Yes, let's do it.
Okay, all right. We had a claim that was disputed and repaid, but later deducted again. How can we dispute it again?
That is a very good question. So zooming out a little bit, that is a thing that Walmart can do. And we've actually seen it kind of ratchet up quite a bit recently. So an example of that is they will take a deduction on a code 22 or 24, which are shortage related claims. The suppliers that we work with will dispute it. It will get approved, and then they will turn around and redispute or rededuct on a different code, like a code 14 or 15, which is like a concealed shortage or concealed pallet deduction. So that is a thing to be aware of. You can redispute that new code that Walmart kind of sends over. Generally speaking, you're going to want to dispute that using the invoice side of APDP rather than the claim side, just because there's kind of no claim technically, because it's just a rededuct on that invoice number. But yeah, you would just flow through the APDP process. You would utilize kind of the same type of proof documentation, and obviously kind of any additional information you have. One thing to note is that anytime Walmart rededucts, we have seen success with that. We do know that suppliers are able to get those like code 14s and 15s repaid, but we do see the success rate go down, mostly because Walmart is basically saying, oops, the money that we took was right, we just did it off of the wrong code. And then the hard thing is things like codes 14 and 15, like those concealed shortages. Basically what that is saying is Walmart is saying, oh, when I scanned in the box of 6 units, it looked like 6 units because the box was closed, so everything looked right. But when I opened it, it was actually 4 units instead of 6. So I'm going to, it's a concealed shortage. I'm not going to pay you for those 2 units. And the tough thing is that that's, as you guys can imagine, extremely hard to fight. Because obviously, most likely you guys are shipping full boxes, but there's just no way for you to prove that that what Walmart opened at the warehouse is, 4 or 6 units in our example. So we do have some teams that are actually now starting to like take pictures of pallets that they sent over, or take pictures of, the trucks and things like that, which is just, it's not great. And we hate that you guys have to do that sometimes, but it does help if you guys are getting a lot of, code 14 and 15 type deductions. So hopefully that's helpful. It's not great, I know.
I feel like that's helpful. And I think that this should answer your question as well, Jane, about your code 22 and code 150. So hopefully that answers that. All right. Do we want to jump back into the content?
Yes, I think we're at the last section. So I'll try and zip through this so we can make sure we save enough time for questions. But yeah, so as you guys know, we have gone through a very long deduction journey so far. We have talked through what they are, kind of how you've gotten them, what they mean, and how you can dispute them. And so kind of the last piece of this is, of course, how do you track that dispute all the way through resolution and repayment? So essentially, there are a couple of different dispute statuses in APDP. So that screenshot that I shared earlier, you should kind of see all the different statuses that are available. And essentially, I'll kind of talk through all of the different buckets. So approved, of course, is the A+ result. That's what we want to see. And essentially what that means, of course, is that Genpact reviewed your dispute. They agree you are right. We took it incorrectly. We should pay you back for this. As we mentioned earlier, disputes can be approved for the full amount or the partial amount. Typically, what we see is if you do get a dispute approved, you're going to see payback appear on a check within 30 days. So that is how it shows up. It'll show up on a check. Occasionally, and we mentioned this earlier, Walmart will approve and pay back a deduction for a specific claim code, only to retake the deduction under a different claim code. And I won't go too hard into this just because we talked about it earlier, but you can dispute this new deduction as well. But as I mentioned earlier, we see a little bit more limited success, just because, again, this is Walmart kind of reaffirming that they took it correctly. Another example of the different statuses in APDP, you're going to have a draft status. So basically what this means is that draft disputes, you've created them in APDP, but you have not yet submitted them to Walmart for review. So they can be incomplete if they're missing required info, or complete if they are ready to submit. And then draft disputes can also cause, essentially cannot submit because this dispute is a duplicate of an existing one. Errors, what that means is you can only have one draft per claim line in APDP. So if you're getting errors to trying to dispute something, we'd recommend just checking your drafts and making sure you haven't already created one. Other different statuses that you can have in APDP are Walmart research. So basically, once you submit this, a dispute will enter the Walmart research phase. So essentially, you've sent it over. Walmart is saying, okay, we're going to go take a look at this and make our determinations. One very, very, very key thing to note on this is that in this state, no adjustments can be made and the dispute cannot be withdrawn. So we get a lot of questions on this. Hey, I submitted it, but I got the dollar amount wrong, or I forgot to attach a document, or whatever it is. We really, really recommend that you do your very best to make sure your disputes are as buttoned up as you can be, just because once they enter Walmart research, they're basically kind of DOA. You can't touch them anymore until Walmart pushes them back to you, either pending more information from you, or they reject them outright, and then you have to restart the whole process. And as we mentioned earlier, and as again, you guys probably all know, Genpact takes a long time to review anything. So, we just want to make sure that you're not kind of stuck for that 2 to 3 month window that we talked about earlier, just because you forgot to attach a bill of lading or whatever it is. So just be aware of that. Pending vendor, kind of what it sounds like. Basically, this is Walmart or Genpact saying, hey, we reviewed it, and we need a little bit more information from you. And so basically they'll kind of send it back to you, and then you'll be able to provide additional proof. One key thing to note here is that you do need to provide additional information within 7 days. So you have 7 days from the time they push it back to you, or the dispute will be canceled. And then when it's canceled, what that means is you have to start the whole process all over again. So good thing to pay attention to anything that falls into the pending vendor bucket. And then kind of the last few statuses are canceled. So Disputes are canceled if the supplier fails to provide enough proof to overturn, or of course, if you aren't providing additional proof in a timely manner. You can also cancel a disputes as well with an APDP. And then rejected essentially happens when Walmart has proof that the deduction was valid. So this is basically Walmart telling you, we reviewed all the proof documentation that you sent over. We don't need any additional proof. Based on what you're sending, we don't agree with you. We're just going to go ahead and reject that. So as we kind of have been talking about throughout this presentation, rejected disputes, you can technically dispute them again. But again, of course, the key is that you need to have new information available. If you kind of resubmit the deduction dispute with the same information that you had before, very, very low chance of success, as you can imagine. So if you are, for example, able to renegotiate with your buyer or whatever it is, or you dig up old buyer emails that you can attach, for example, then of course you can kind of go through that process again. But if you're going to, again, resubmit with all the same proof documentation, unfortunately, probably not going to get you too far. Okay. Whew, I feel like that was a marathon. I have drowned you guys in information. I apologize. I hope it has been helpful, but definitely wanted to make sure we had time for questions.
Perfect. All right. We do have quite a few questions. I'm going to give you a softball for the first one.
All right.
Since we are a member of Supply Pike, is there any deduction that we have to dispute in APTP still, except the ones that we have to dispute through High Radius and the buyer?
That is a very good question. So if you are a Supply Pike subscriber on Deductions Navigator, no, you do not have to resubmit anything through APDP. So we have functionality and features in place. Once you hit submit in Deductions Navigator, that automatically gets shipped off for you to APDP. We also have features and functionality around redisputing. So if Walmart or Genpack sends anything back to you and you need to resubmit it and attach additional proof documentation, you can do that 100% through Deductions Navigator. And then, as I kind of mentioned, cool stuff to give you guys some context. If you're not on Deductions Navigator today, we automatically sync with APDP, and we allow for that one-click disputing that I mentioned. So we automatically pull all the relevant information for you, pull all the proof documentation for you, which is really cool. We have integrations with 60 different carriers and 3PLs. And so literally all you have to do is go into the claim that you want to dispute, hit one-click dispute button, and you are done. So yeah.
We're doing the demo after this, Stacy.
Sorry, I can't help it. I love our apps.
Well, that's great. Okay, so how come? So this was one that was pre-submit. So there was a claim that was repaid in one day, and then a little while later it was deducted again. So can you kind of talk about the claims that were, I know that we covered the ones that were deducted again and how you can go and dispute it. Can you talk about some of the deductions that we've seen that have been repaid?
Yes. So that is a great question. So it kind of falls back into that example that we were giving earlier. The most common that we have seen is basically a shortage type deduction. So 22, 24, 25. Walmart deducts it, you dispute it, they pay you back. And then a day later, they're like, oh, kidding, we actually met this code. And usually, again, we will see code like 13s, which are substitutions, and 14s and 15s, which are concealed shortage type claims. And essentially this is, the warehouse telling Genpack that, oh, when we opened up this box, or we, split open this pallet, it did not have what we expected it to have. So we have seen some success with these like code 13, 14, and 15 type claims. Usually you will have success with your shipping documents. So again, with collect, it's going to be that bill of lading. With prepaid, it's going to be that proof of delivery. And then I kind of mentioned, we are starting to see some teams actually take pictures of the insides of cases that they're sending and pallets that they're sending and things like that. And then when they provide that sort of proof documentation, then they're able to get those reversed. Again, I kind of mentioned it is a little bit more difficult because it is very he said, she said, because you're not there at the DC to kind of, actually prove whether or not that's true. One thing that I would kind of note as a trade-off for you guys to think about, is really kind of examine how often you're getting these code 13, 14, and 15s retaken. Just because obviously I fully understand the want to get every dollar back from Walmart. I am on that same page with you, but it is highly manual to try and take pictures and do things like that to get additional proof. So I would maybe take a look at the proportion of which it's happening. If it's happening often, then maybe worth it to make that investment. If it's not happening often enough, and only you guys can decide what that threshold is, right? Is it 5%, 10%, 15%, 1%, whatever it is, then you may kind of just write that off as the quote unquote cost of doing business with Walmart. So again, we have seen success, but much more limited than the standard kind of shortage type deductions.
Perfect. Thank you so much.
Mhm.
Hey, this one is about FedEx. Are you ready?
Yes.
Right. For short shipping deductions like 22, 25, we usually send the product to FedEx Ground. Oftentimes, FedEx doesn't include the signature and the POD, and I think it makes it a huge problem on getting approval. Is there a way to solve this better? And I will say that this is not specific just to, like in general, this question is specific to FedEx, but we see this for a lot of carriers. So how would you solve this, Stacy?
That is a very good question. So I would agree with you that typically speaking, Walmart is going to be looking for that signed documentation, just because that's a legal document, really proving that what happened actually happened. Generally speaking, and I'm trying to rack my brain on this, and I apologize that I can't think of it off the top of my head, but I know we experienced this with another one of our customers who was having that same issue, and we were able to solve it. And of course, I cannot remember how we solved it right now, but I believe what we did is we actually helped them reach out to their FedEx account manager to kind of explain the situation, and basically talk through essentially how we could transform that process with them. So I apologize that this is kind of a half answer. I just want to, as Melody mentioned, this is something that we see. If you wouldn't mind, attendee, reaching out to us after this, I will touch base with our deductions team once we get off the call, and see if they can remind me how we handled that. But that is a great question.
Awesome. All right. This one's about overages. We get this question also a lot.
Yes.
So how do you find out about overshipping, and how are you able to actually get paid back for those overages?
So that is a fun, kind of slightly tricky question, because it depends. Are we talking about old Walmart or new Walmart? So old Walmart, you used to be able to, like how I would do it when I lived in the supplier world, is you would be able to pull kind of inventory receipt reports out of DSS. Decision support, which is Walmart's ad hoc query tool. And then it would basically tell you, you'd be able to compare your PO against what Retail Link is saying was received. And in old Walmart, you used to be able to then kind of take that overage, and you could actually invoice Walmart and say, hey, you received 10 more units of this than you actually should have, or whatever it is. And Walmart, if you can imagine, would actually pay you for the additional inventory, which is what was fair. New Walmart, however, to new Walmart, overages are actually something that you can be penalized for. So Walmart recently rolled out something called the SQEP, or Supplier Quality Excellence Program. And that is around kind of barcode and labeling compliance, ASN, so your advanced shipping notices, PO accuracy, all of that good stuff. Overages are now a finable offense to Walmart. So they will actually let you know now through SQEP if there were overages, and rather than invoicing them for it, they actually want to fine you for it now, because basically you're not sending Walmart what they expected to receive. So why I make the distinction between old Walmart and new Walmart is because your mileage will still vary. depending on the teams that you are working with, depending on the departments, depending on the buyers. I have seen teams that are still able to invoice for overages. You reach out to your buyer and say, hey, buyer, here's proof that you guys received 10 extra units than what you ordered. We're going to go ahead and invoice you for that. And then buyer goes, sure, let's do it. And then we also work with teams that have buyers and departments that are, saying, sorry, that's too bad, you did it incorrectly. And now we have an SQED fine that you have to pay. So it does really depend on who you're working with. If you, again, kind of want to reach out to us after this, I'm happy to provide kind of insights on what we're seeing across the different departments. But again, kind of the long story short is that it just depends.
Yes, and we actually got a question on, is there a webinar in the future specifically on how to dispute these SQEP chargebacks, and are they disputable? So we do not currently have a webinar planned on how to dispute them, just because the process is so new. There's not a lot of information out there, but we do have an upcoming webinar on June 9th. Let me double check. Yep, June 9th on SQEP. So if you guys want to join us for that, I will send it in the chat. We can hopefully answer a lot of your questions there. All right, so we are now at time. I know that we have a couple of more questions, but if you guys are curious, you want to meet with us again, you didn't get your questions answered, you weren't able to ask them, whatever, please email us. So there are our actual emails right there. Reach out, ask us, we'll be happy to help, or you can go to our website, supplypack.com. I will send that link also in the chat, so look out for that. Also, we love seeing you guys. So if you want to book some time on our calendar, I will also send a link to do that. So I know this is usually where a lot of people jump off. So thank you so much, everyone, for joining us here today. If you want to stay for an extra quick little demo on our products, we would love to have you. But if not, hope you have a great rest of your day and hope we see you again soon. Thank you, Stacy, so much for doing this webinar with us. And hopefully you guys are staying on. But if not, have a great rest of your day.
Yeah, just like Melody said, thank you guys. Okay, I am going to go ahead and stop sharing the presentation. And as Melody mentioned, go ahead and hop over to Deductions Navigator, our Walmart offering. So as I mentioned earlier, just so you guys know, we have this available for Walmart and Kroger. Target is launching next week. We are so excited about that. So if this is interesting to you, definitely stay on. And then we are going to have essentially the same functionality for Amazon as well later on in the year. So we're going to do a super high level overview on Deductions Navigator, just to let you guys know kind of all of the fun stuff that we've got going on here. So really quickly, I've got a demo company up, of course, but one of the cool things that we do with Deductions Navigator is we have a dashboard view of all of your deductions. I know this seems kind of basic, but you would be surprised at how difficult this information is to find on APIS in Retail Link. So kind of a couple of cool examples of information that we're able to share are basically the total amount of deductions that you've received from Walmart, what's actionable, so on the table that you haven't disputed yet, anything that is awaiting repayment, and what has actually been paid back from the Walmart teams. One of the things that I really, really love about Deductions Navigator is more than just this kind of high level 30,000 foot view. We also provide really, really good strategic information to help you kind of determine the root cause of your deductions issue. So we don't want to just help you get your money back. We want to make sure that you understand where it's going so that you can kind of put changes in place to try and limit that issue. So great example of this is, this particular kind of demo company that we have. We can see their top 3, deduction codes are 22s, 24s, and 25s, which are all shortage related codes. So, hey, this is a really quote unquote easy fix that you can work with your transportation team on and make sure that you're putting, again, those strategic moves in place to prevent them from even happening. Other cool types of data that we can show are things like deductions by amount. So, how large are your deductions? What kind of bucket sizes are they falling into? Deductions over time to help you find any sort of trends. Deductions by item number. I like this one a lot because I think it's really helpful to find kind of items that are disproportionately receiving deductions. So let's just say, for example, like, hey, this is, representing 25% of the deductions that I've received, but maybe this is only responsible for 10% of my sales. So it's a smaller item, but disproportionately getting hit with deductions. I would probably check into that and see what's going on there. And then we can also show you deductions by location. So are there any particular DCs or stores that stand out that are just kind of giving you guys grief? But moving into the real meat and potatoes of the app, this is really where the app starts to shine, is we are able to pull essentially a very detailed list view of your deductions. You guys can kind of see here, we'll pull every single one that you receive. And we have amazing filtering capabilities, which if you guys have tried to filter in APIS, this is not a thing. So you can really kind of slice and dice down to whatever it is that you are looking for. Hey, I only want to look at my shortage related codes that have, certain documents attached, proof of deliveries attached, as an example. And then from there, once you kind of slice and dice to the deductions that you actually want to work on, you can actually click into any of these deductions. And I kind of mentioned this earlier during the questions portion, but you guys can see here, essentially, we are automatically pulling all of this information for you. So kind of in the current way of working, what we have found is many of our suppliers usually take anywhere between 15 to 20 minutes to actually research the claim, pull all the relevant information, find the proof documentation from carrier portals or buyer emails or whatever it is. And we really cut that down to about 5 seconds. So you guys can kind of see here that we've got claim information automatically pulled, order information as well. And then we also, really, this is the magic of it, have the ability to integrate with your carriers or 3PLs to automatically pull back VOLs, PODs, and all of that good stuff. So anytime you go into a claim, it's already waiting for you. Yay. So essentially, we've got some business logic in place that will say, hey, this is a code 25 shortage related deductions. I expect to see a purchase order, invoice, and claim, as well as a VOL, let's just say. It's ready to dispute. And then all I have to do is hit the blue submit dispute button. It'll automatically get sent off to APDP for me, and we will track that all the way through to resolution for you. So a couple of last few kind of bells and whistles that I wanted to point out for you guys. Our team said one-click disputing is not fast enough. We want to give you guys some real powerful tools. So in addition to kind of that one-click dispute, if you do want to do dispute by dispute, you can. We also have the ability to do bulk disputing. So you guys can kind of see, I kind of filtered it down to 100. In this example, I've got 74 selected. I can basically select all and hit submit dispute, and it'll send all 74 off for me at once to APDP. And our most recent feature that we just launched, I think last month actually, is auto disputing. So now we go from kind of like one click to a fractional click to 0 clicks. So we allow our suppliers to essentially set certain thresholds. So you can say, as an example, anything that is a code 22 or 24 that is less than $500 that has a BOL attached, automatically submit that for me. So it doesn't even show up in your to-do list, so to speak. It automatically gets done. So we have teams that are able to clear like 2 years worth of backlog with us in literally days. And then from there, it becomes a really powerful maintenance tool that really just allows you to have peace of mind and frees up your time to work on more strategic things rather than sitting there manually typing in claim information to every single one on APDP. But yeah, I think that's all I've got today. Only last thing that I would kind of share is that we do have a free trial available for Deductions Navigator. I always recommend it just because it never hurts. I always think the more information you have, the better decisions you can make about your company. And I would say pull it in. If you're doing great, then this is a nice gut check, and you're like, hey, you know what? We're doing great. Thanks for checking on that for me, guys. And if not, if you do pull it in, you're like, oh, maybe we're not hitting every deduction that we thought we were. Then hey, you've kind of started that first step to make sure that you're on the path to get all the money that you're owed from Walmart.
Yeah.
And that's all she wrote.
Yeah, and I see that we have a couple of questions in the chat, so I just want to address that before we jump off. So will we still need to attach the docs to each claim inside Deductions Navigator? Yeah, the answer is no. We pull it all for you. Even the shipping documents, like Stacey said, we integrate with over 60 carriers, 3PLs, warehouses, all of that stuff. And we even do really neat stuff where you can send it to us through email and we'll automatically, like you truly just have to email it to us and we'll attach it to the correct claim. And then does Deductions Navigator have the capability to be integrated with our systems? Yes, the answer is yes. Actually, I will say most likely, but if we're not able to, then we will work through it and integrate. But I think there's only been one or two customers or that we haven't been able to fully integrate with their system out of literally hundreds. So very, very small percentage. The easiest way to get that figured out is for you guys to meet with us and then we can figure that out with you. Are you able to pull Walmart freight BOLs? Stacey, that's more of a question for you, I feel like.
Yeah, so for Walmart freight BOLs, typically speaking, so BOLs are usually going to come from your warehouse or the 3PL that you work with. So like Melanie mentioned, if you guys are interested in kind of checking us out, we actually have a team that specializes in integrations, and they would be able to kind of, clarify for you and work with you on how to pull that documentation. Like Melanie mentioned, I've worked here for 3 years. I've maybe seen one or two companies that we haven't been able to support and find that documentation. And I think I saw one more on FedEx Ground. Yes, we already have an integration with FedEx Ground. So literally if you guys have mint.com where you kind of like, all you do is put in like your different banking information and it automatically gets pulled in. Same thing for us. We would just need credentials and then we'll automatically start the syncing process. So there's zero lift on your end. You don't need to involve IT. You don't need to build API keys or anything like that. Our integration process takes Melody 2 to 5 days, if that.
Maybe 2 days. We've sometimes, it depends on how large your company is.
Yeah.
For some of the medium sized to small, we can do it in hours, literally hours. So it's
pretty
very
cool.
small integration process.
Yeah.
The last question I want to answer before we jump off is how long can we try the free demo? So the free demo is for 7 days. We usually see that within 7 days, you can figure out if you like our software or not, you can find out the value. So it's a 7-day free trial. And then our team can help you answer any questions through that.
Yeah. And one last thing, you are actually able to send disputes in during the trial. So we allow you to send up to 10 disputes. We actually have suppliers that will win back money on the trial. So it's really cool. We're really serious about helping suppliers. So we hope it's something that resonates with you guys and you come talk to us after this for sure.
Perfect. And I will, just so that you guys, it's bumped up, let me actually send you the link to book some time with us one more time. Just book some time on our calendar and we can help get you set up on your trial. It's worth testing out, worth trying. All right. Thank you, everyone. Have a fantastic rest of your day and hopefully we'll see you again soon.
Thanks, guys. Bye.
Oh, wait, one more question.
Okay. Yeah.
Just kidding.
Yes.
Do you know the approval rate for disputes that get approved and then rededucted?
Okay, so generally speaking, if it's an invalid, so just kind of that first level dispute, if it's invalid, shortage related, we usually see an approval rate of over, like I said, over 95%, of course, assuming it's invalid and we have proof documentation. For the redispute, we usually will see that drop pretty precipitously to anywhere between 50 and 60%. Again, just because this is Walmart saying, oh, we took it correctly the right time, we just didn't do it under the right code. So yeah, that drops pretty significantly for the rededuct.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much. And we will talk to you again hopefully soon. Have a great rest of your day. Bye, everyone.
Thanks, guys. Bye.